So how do I apply the cosine law? Well, in this case here, I'm going to try to apply the sine law and see what happens. So here, the sine law is typically a little bit easier, so that's probably going to be my first choice. And I'm going to look for an angle and opposite side pair. So here I've got an angle, but I don't know this side. Here I've got a side, but I don't know the angle, and again a side, no angle. And because two angles are missing, I can't deduce one of these angles by subtracting from 180. So I can't use sine law. So this is a situation where I have side, angle, side. So I'm just going to write that down, side, angle, side. In a side, angle, side case, we want to use cosine law. Okay, so what does the cosine law look like? So there's really only one thing that we have to watch out for. So I'm going to call this angle C and side C. And the only thing I have to be careful of is that side C and cosine, the angle C, have to be on opposite sides here. Okay, so I can't use cos A here. If this is C, I have to use cos C here, and vice versa. If this is angle C, I have to use side C on the other side of the equation. Okay, so keeping that in mind then, I'm going to solve for that C squared. Okay, so I'm going to go C squared is equal to A squared plus B squared minus 2 times A times B times cosine of angle A. Okay, and again, what I'm just making sure of is the side C that I'm solving for has to have the cosine of that angle in the formula. Okay, so that's really the only thing that I have to be careful of when applying this formula. So, working out the calculations here. So using my calculator. Okay, go to my calculator here. So I'm going to go 330 squared plus 28 squared gives me 16. So C squared equals 1684. Okay, so just double checking that. Okay, so I get 1684 minus, okay, so it's going to be 2 times 30 times 28 times cosine of 35, and that gives me 1376.18. Okay, and so that looks pretty good because that's now going to be subtracting, because as I go from a 90-degree angle on a longer C side, as the angle shrinks, that cosine should give me positive, and it should take away the area of C squared, which makes my C side shorter. Okay, so my C squared works out to be, when I subtract from 1684, okay, I get 307.82. Okay, and then solving for side C, I'm going to square root that. 307.82 square root gives me 17.54. Okay, and again, based on rounding, okay, there could be some inaccuracy there, but based on rounding, that's close enough. Okay, so now I'll solve for one side. Now I just have to figure out the angles. Now, because if I use my sine law here, I now have an angle opposite side pairing. I have to use angle side side. I may have to worry about the ambiguous case, although maybe if I solve for this side here, I can probably get away with that. So to be certain, I'm going to use the cosine law again. But now in this case, I'm going to make sure that the angle that I use, I'm going to just say that this is angle B on this side and angle A on this side. Okay, so the angle B and side 28 are opposite of each other. Okay, so then when I set up the cosine law, okay, it looks like this. B squared Okay, so I'm going to do it this way. So write it out. B squared equals C squared plus A squared minus 2AC cosine of angle B. Okay, and that gives me, that's going to find this angle B in here. And I got to make sure that as long as the opposite side and angle show up in my equations with the angle here and the side here, the cosine law will work. Okay, so when I work this out, I'm going to end up with 28 squared is equal to C squared, which is 1754 squared, plus A squared, which is 30 squared, minus 2 times 30 times 17.54 cosine of angle B. Now notice that the only thing unknown in this expression is cosine of angle B, and then if I find the cosine of angle B, I can solve for angle B. So I'm just going to first of all solve for cosine of angle B, and I get 28 squared minus 17.54 squared minus 30 squared, all divided by negative 2 times 30 times 17.54. Okay, so then putting that into my calculator, working that out, there's a lot of calculating there, so I just have to be careful with my brackets and everything. Okay, so let's go 28 squared minus 17.54 squared minus 30 squared equals negative 423.65. Again, your decimals might be a little bit off than mine because now we have to at some point introduce rounding. So I'm going to, in the denominator, end up with negative 1052.4, and that cosine ratio works out to be 423.65 divided by 1052.4. So it's approximately 0.40. I'm going to round that to 3. So when I solve for angle beta, or angle B, I need to use arc cos. I input the ratio. Okay, the ratio is positive. Okay, so that means that my angle is acute. So I end up with 66.26 degrees. So that works out to be 66.26 degrees. I don't need to worry about an ambiguous case for cosine law, therefore this is the only angle I can get. Okay, and then I can deduce the last angle there by subtracting from 180. So 180 minus 35 minus 66.26. I end up with 78.74 degrees approximately. Okay, so there's my angle B. There's my side C, and angle A works out to be 78.74 degrees, and I find that through subtracting from 180 degrees in a triangle. Okay, so there it is. There's using the cosine law. I started with side angle side. I can't pair up opposite side and angle pairs because they don't exist in side angle side, so I cannot use sine law, so I'm stuck with using cosine law. The key to setting up the formula is the opposite side C and angle C have to show up in the formula of these two parts. Same here. The opposite side here and the angle have to show up in these two parts in the formula. The other two sides doesn't really matter where you put them. You can interchange them, doesn't really matter. Okay, the key is matching this angle inside with this angle in that side.